Hello, football fans, and welcome to the SumerSports Show. I'm Sam Brookhouse, and while Lindsay is on the road, we decided to turn our focus from our general NFL focus to turn to a little college football. Why are we focusing on college football? Because there has been a seismic change in recent years that SumerSports is turning its eye to via our Sumer Scout and Sumer Traits product, and that is the transfer portal. The transfer portal is coming up. Coaches have moved around in order to take advantage of it. And today we are going to discuss the impacts of the transfer portal. And frankly, it's impacted me as a former college football player. Many of the players who I played with post 2018 were added to my Tulane team via the transfer portal. And we're also going to break down some of the best players in this transfer portal class. We will be joined by former general manager and NFL Network analyst, and now one of our Sumer scouts. He's looked at these guys. He's going to give us a sense of how he would approach the transfer portal as an ex-general manager, and that's Mike Mayock, our friend who has joined us throughout the season and who will continue to join us through the draft. So, Mike, the transfer portal has had so many changes over the year. I'm just going to read some of them to you. It was introduced in 2018. The result of the changes in the data is that there was around 1,500 transfers in 2018, well up from the prior years, obviously, when you had to sit out, to nearly quadruple that. Yep. After the 2024 season. There's been yearly changes in 2021. They allowed for only one transfer without sitting out. That was then changed in 2024. In 2022, there was the introduction of transfer windows, but there were exceptions, canceled scholarships, eliminated teams, coaching changes, grad transfers. That has since been changed from a winter window and a spring window to just a winter window now. With all these changes, and as a former executive and someone who is still scouting this stuff, how do you feel that teams are kind of grasping these wild changes?
Wild is a good word for it. And it's funny because I'm always scraping around looking for video of coaches, scouts, people talking about the portal and NIL. And I'm on the phone talking to different people. And I came across PJ Fleck yesterday. And at a press conference, really cool answer to what basically you just said. And to paraphrase him, he said, basically, we're entering into an NFL type system of free agency with no infrastructure to help us. And the NFL set up and set the run as a model, and it runs fluidly. And it's the wild, wild west out here where we're all doing things differently and we're not set up to really handle that. And for me, what it comes down to is kind of volume and timing. And you touched on some of that, Sam. I mean, the volume, I looked up a couple numbers too. And I mean, for the 24-25 portal, 3,400 FBS scholarship players. Okay. That's 20 to 30 per team. There's 130 plus or minus teams, right? So that's what's happening. And then overall, there were over 11,000 when you throw in all the non-scholarship Division II and III and whatever. So when you look at a program that historically is a model with a head coach and those guys running around recruiting high school kids that do their own tape study and have to coach their players, I mean, I don't know how coaches have been able to handle that over the last couple of years. They're kind of changing the system to a more of a GM-centric system now. But really, look at this year's playoffs. I mean, Indiana is the number one seed, and they're heavily invested. Kurt Cignetti brought a bunch of his JMU guys. Texas Tech, when's the last time you saw Texas Tech? They're number 4 seed. And the only two guys I've done tape on from Texas Tech are they're 2 edge rushers, and they're both legit. I mean, really legit. And then there's Ole Miss at 6. Those 3 schools were heavily, heavily invested and turned programs around effectively, you know, especially Indiana and Texas Tech. And they're in the top 6 seeds. They're kind of the models for other teams looking to flip programs. And here's my last point here is that obviously the portal has gone from 2 windows to 1. It's January 2nd to the 16th. But alert, hundreds of players will have already committed through agents and schools illegally by then. Okay? I hear it all the time. I mean, so if you're a coach, a head coach at a D1 school, how do you handle that? You're coaching your players and your team. Whether you make a bowl or that doesn't matter, because in October, November, December, players are already committing. And if you're not set up with evaluations of these players, you got no shot.
So you mentioned Indiana there. They've basically become the model for this. Kurt Signetti comes in from James Madison, brings in a lot of his guys, but also brings in some absolute ringers. Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman Trophy winner from California. I know you scouted a lot of these guys in our last transfer portal window. What was some of the things you picked up on with these players and why they were able to mesh so well at Indiana and why that system is built to support that?
Well, I mean, let's start with the quarterback. I went back and I didn't look at his Cal tape. I did his Indiana tape this year, but I went back and looked at some of the grades in the Sumer system and some of my buddies from around the league, what they had on him a year ago at Cal. They were pedestrian. Okay. Don't suggest first round or second round. Don't suggest a Heisman Trophy winner. But Kurt Signetti brings him to be a starting quarterback after he had Curtis Rourke, another guy. And Signetti, trust me, I don't care if he started at IUP or whatever. This is a true football guy that gets it. So he brings Mendoza in, and I've done 3 tapes, and basically all these guys got overlooked for some reason coming out of high school, right? And I'm not sure what it was in Mendoza's case, but he's going to go in the first or second round, depending on, what kind of grade you have on him. His wide receiver, Elijah Surratt, he started at St. Francis in Pennsylvania. And the only reason I know about St. Francis is my younger brother was the head coach there years ago. Okay. Then he went to JMU, and then he came with Signetti along with 12 or 13 other players. And now they're the number 1 seed. And, I want to talk about some of these next 2 or 3 kids. First is Surratt. Why did he end up at St. Francis of Loretto, Pennsylvania? Probably because he ran 4.55 to 4.6 coming out. Based on the tape I've watched, he's not a speed guy, possession guy, back shoulder guy, really a good football player. I mean, he's got everything except for pure speed. Will he create a lot of separation? No, but he's going to have to make up for that with physicality and back shoulder and hands, and he can. But he got overlooked coming out of high school, and this system has allowed him now to showcase his talents in the Big Ten and a national championship potential game. And I look at that and I say, that's great. That's what this system is really for, right? It's for all that. Let's go to Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, another JMU guy. First tape I put in, okay, probably didn't run a grade 40, probably not the ideal height, weight, speed coming out of high school, but what his traits don't jump off the tape. But the more you watch, the more you go, this is a heck of a football player. Understands pass game, especially from his own perspective. Comes downhill, can take guys on either shoulder and disengage. At the end of the day, is he going to be a first or second round pick? Probably not because of his traits. But I think the guy's going to play at a high level in the NFL. And maybe my favorite player on their team is D'Angelo Pons. Pons is another JMU transfer. He's 5'9", 173. And you throw the tape in and you go, can't possibly. I mean, why am I watching this kid? And then he jumps off the tape. Quickness, change of direction, toughness, tackling, competes. They have him mostly on the outside. He probably projects inside in the NFL. We drafted a guy with the Raiders, Amik Robertson, in the 4th round. And a little bit similar, maybe 10 pounds heavier, but like 5'9". He was an outside guy at Louisiana. Probably too small against some of the big guys, so we kicked him inside. That's a hard transition because you got run fits, and you really have to be smart and quick-witted to deal with all the run fit changes and bunch sets and everything they get you involved in. So it's easy to see why he got overlooked. He's 5'9", 173, goes to JMU, goes to Indiana on the biggest stage. Now he's probably going to be a second-day pick because he's so damn competitive. So when you look at these kids at Indiana, it's kind of a microcosm of what it can do for kids jumping from a lower level up to a high level in the P4 conference.
Definitely. And I want to focus in on some of the verbiage you're using, because we're talking about these guys, they may not be the first pick in the draft, but when we're talking about these middle day 2, day 3 picks, those are true impact players in college. Can you go kind of into our Sumer Scout system and how we're evaluating these guys, both for college and the pros, but how that mirrors how they may make an impact moving from a St. Francis to an Indiana, for example?
Traits are always important, okay? And we're going to value those, and we're going to analyze them, and we're going to put numbers on them, and analytics is going to attach importance to that. However, when you watch guys, especially like Aiden Fisher and D'Angelo Pons, the more tape you watch, the more appreciation you get for their instincts, which is a huge deal in the NFL or college. Their instinct, their toughness, their competes. Those are all part of our grading module at SumerSports, a big part of it. So part of the issue is if you're a college guy and you got no time, or what's your staff to evaluate portal players, and a 21-year-old college kid it's an intern brings you a 10 play overview of a kid just from some video we collected, and you're going to make a decision on a $500,000 player in the portal off that. No, you got to understand the instincts, the toughness, the competes, all the other things that go along with that. And the more tape you watch, and I'm telling you, it's not just video highlights, it's full games. And our guys watch 3 full games of every guy that potentially could be in the portal. So there's a big difference in understanding how to scout, not just traits, but also all the rest of those intangibles that make a guy a better player than the traits might lead you to believe he is.
Right. And you mentioned something I think is very key for our audience to understand. You mentioned that this could be a 21-year-old undergrad assistant who is doing the scouting within these schools. The infrastructure is not there. At SumerSports, we have, 400, 500 plus years of cumulative experience of scouts coming together. As a former general manager who had to organize a scouting structure for the National Football League, can you compare kind of what you've heard from college? In my experience, it was the GAs, it was the undergrad assistants, to the level of importance and the level of sophistication in the NFL. Are they even remotely close right now?
I think the brutally honest answer is we're all over the board. Okay. There are certain programs, a few of them, not a lot, that proactively have gone out there as the rules have been changing, hired GMs and try to put a staff together. But A, there are not many of them. And B, when you have to start making decisions on players illegally in November and December through agents that are bringing their players to you, how big is the staff really? How many people do you have, and how qualified are they to write reports and do the tape? So even most of those schools, the minority that have a GM, and they don't have the volume of scouts with the background to handle this. So when I was kind of blown away, because I was just on my side doing I do college reports on draftable players. And then I sat down with some of the portal guys a while ago, and I was like, wait a minute, we have 14 full-time portal scouts? That's, as an NFL GM, that's about how many scouts you have. Overall, you might have 14 college scouts, total. So 14 portal scouts, in addition to all the other scouts like me and other guys that we have doing other things. If you look at the resumes of these guys, they're not 20-year-old GAs that are also going to school. What they really are full-time former NFL scouts, former NFL coaches, former college coaches, and they all have 15, 20, 25 years of writing reports on exactly this type of kid. So the thing's evolving, and each university has got to find a way to deal with it their own way.
So some of these guys, Mike, they transferred up. And I think that's a real trend now in the transfer portal. Going to run through them. Danny Scudero, Sac State, San Jose State, Santana Hopper, App State to Tulane. Brendan Storesby, a little bit of a lateral move, but we got two views at him, Indiana, Cincinnati. Do you think, especially given the success of guys like Cameron Ward, of Jared Verse, of Braden Fisk, that this is something that NFL evaluators and college evaluators alike are incorporating players' ability to survive and advance up the college ranks?
In the old days, it was a heavy negative, right? It was a transfer, and it was kind of like, oh man, every scout had to figure out why, what the issues were. It was part of your write-up and your reports. It was a big deal. Now it's completely viewed a different way because everybody's doing it. And really, like if I look at Jared Verse, and I'll tell you a quick story because I never even heard of him when he left Albany. Nobody had. He goes to Florida State, and either his first or second game was at LSU. And I was watching the LSU tackles, not him. And I'm like, who is this kid coming off the edge destroying this game? And it was a big physical power-based rusher with enough twitch to bother you, yet very raw. And he was just eating these kids alive. And so I went and looked him up, and I was like, wow, this is a transfer from what, Division II Albany or whatever? And that got me totally into watching him. And then his teammate, Braden Fisk, same thing from one of the MAC schools in Michigan, Western Michigan, I think. He ends up there, and he's like the Energizer Bunny. And his tape, the two of them, their tape it opened my eyes. Maybe there's a reason they didn't get recruited out of high school that we all overlooked, and the same thing with Cam Ward ending up at Miami, 3 different colleges. We used to have to depend solely on the Senior Bowl or the East-West game with guys from lower levels. I mean, look at Quinyon Mitchell. He stayed at Toledo, and maybe the reason he went late first round and the Eagles stole him was because teams only had the Senior Bowl to evaluate. They didn't have a full season of playing in the FCC or the ACC or the Big Ten or whatever. So I think from an NFL perspective, it's very different, and it's a hell of a lot easier to evaluate a kid with a level of competition that way.
Yeah, and you mentioned that FCS jump. That's one of these guys, Danny Scudero, the slot receiver from San Jose State. He made the jump from Sacramento State to San Jose State. The interesting thing about San Jose State is they run a very unique offense, the spread and shred, that basically allows a receiver like Danny Scudero or a guy like Nick Nash, who came out to the draft last year. It really empowers them as the center of the offense. It shows up on film. He's constantly in a ton of space. It shows up in the analytics. He had one of the best separation scores of anyone in college football. But that being said, if he's going to go from San Jose State to a bigger program, he's probably not going to be the center point of the offense. Given the scheme diversity in college, do you think that there's a little bit more impetus on scheme fit amongst the college transfer portal scouting than there is in the pros, or do you still think you're just looking for the best guy?
I think when you're a really good coach at any level, you're taking advantage of the talent you have. You're trying to put them in a position to succeed. So if Danny Scudero shows up on my team through the portal, and we've done the scouting, and we know what he is, he can separate. We like his play speed. He can get vertical. We love his hands. If he shows up on our team, there has to be kind of a plan between the people that scouted him and the coaches. No different than the NFL. Like, hey, he was their focal point. But for us, maybe because he's 5'9", 174 with great quickness and separation ability, he's a slot with us starting out. And we're going to use him in a certain way. And we're going to highlight his ability to separate, especially against any kind of blitz packages, et cetera, where he's got to win quickly. So I think that's how each individual school will look at a kid like Scudero. How can he help us? Yeah, what's the fit? But if you really like the kid and he's a talented skill player, it ought to be more about finding ways to get him in positions to win.
Right. And we're talking about scheme. I think the interesting thing about college as well is you got these guys who may not have prototypical size for the NFL who may be able to succeed. I watched Santana Hopper all year at Tulane. Here's a guy who's maybe 6'1, 6'2, 265 pounds. He was very productive, ends up making the Athletics second team All-American list. But he's a real looper. He's a stunt guy. That's where we found in the analytics that he was most successful was on those loops and stunts, despite being a 4-eye, a 3 tech. Having been in those positions where you are setting up a scouting system and you're setting up the prototype of guy, is there a fit for these kind of smaller players who may be able to make an impact? We talk about Jared Verse, coming up from Albany. He obviously has great size, 6'5", 265, 275. But Braden Fisk is another guy who was very similar to Hopper, where it's a smaller guy, may have speed. What do you think the adjustments that the bigger Power 5 schools are making for size is in the transfer portal?
Really good question. And, a lot of the, like the SEC schools, are kind of an odd-based front in normal personnel that then segue in sub packages to just about everything. And that's where you find value in a player like Santana Hopper. So is he a 5 technique or a 4-eye, which for people watching basically means you're on that inside edge of the tackle, or you're on the tackle. And, so what we're usually looking for in the NFL or big college programs for those guys are length and size. You're looking for guys that are, 6'6", 285. That's your 5 technique. This kid's 6'2" and 265, but kind of an inside player. So he's probably too small in base for most of the packages, but because we're in sub packages anywhere from 70 to 95% of the time in college and NFL, there are always spots for these kind of guys. And that value has gone up with the increase in pass game in the college and the NFL and winning quickly. So you talk about a looper, a twister. Those guys are invaluable. So now all of a sudden you're in 3rd and 6, and you got him inside, but it's not a run threat. He's going to get up the field. He's going to twist. You can move him up and down the whole line. Doesn't matter where, and let him go. Attack one-on-one, let him loop, let him twist, stand him up. There are all kinds of ways to get creative with you. If a guy's got explosion, quickness, violent hands, he can get to the quarterback, you can find a way to get him involved a big percent of the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me. These are all very premium positions. And as a data scientist, data analyst, it's been interesting to see what positions you're able to get through the transfer portal. And the one where everyone is trying to hit, obviously, is quarterback. And in recent years, we have seen teams go out and get a guy who they thought was successful at a rival school or a Power 4 school, and it not necessarily play out super well. Nico Iamaleava comes to mind, where Tennessee spent a ton of money on him, then UCLA spends a ton of money on him, and it doesn't necessarily work out. We haven't seen those big spins really make a big difference, but we have seen experienced guys like Will Howard, for example, move from Kansas State to Ohio State, end up winning a title. Riley Leonard, an experienced guy at Duke, he ends up at Notre Dame and plays pretty well. And I think that guy could be Brendan Sorsby this year from Cincinnati. I watched him all year in the Big 12, led one of the most prolific passing offenses. They kind of scuttled a little bit down the stretch that may give some evaluators a little bit of chagrin about, can he really compete at that level? But Mike, when you're looking at a Power 4 to Power 4 jump, do you think that's going to be continued to be number one, invested in? You think about Cam Ward, he was one of those guys, Washington State, but he had already proven it at Incarnate Word. Then he goes to Washington State, then he goes to Miami. Or do you think that when you're looking at these guys who are on a 7-5 team, and maybe they're playing really well, but maybe that ceiling is a little lower than a guy that potentially you could go out and get in high school? What are your thoughts on kind of the quarterback market amongst those P4 to P4 transfer portal guys?
Yeah, couple things. unlike the other two positions we talked about, fit does matter here. Okay, so you can find a slot receiver or a explosive defensive lineman and fit him in your sub package. You can do those, no problem. That's really easy. Fit matters here. What kind of scheme do you have? And you want to get a guy that in general can fit your scheme. Of course, you're going to tailor things differently to what he does well, but he's got to fit what you do schematically. Okay, and that's critical for the kid, and it's critical for your program. Power 4 to power 4. I don't think that's a problem. I think there's a story to be told about every kid in the portal. Part of the problem of the portal is that every kid I ever met thinks he's going to play in the league. Every kid. I mean, all of them, right? So that's why so many of them don't make it. And that's another sad story, because the school they're leaving is not going to want them back because they already filled their spot. I mean, so power 4 to power 4, it's important to find the fit. Tyler Shuck, what's the right fit for you, Tyler? Right? And he goes and he ends up with a quarterback-centric coach in Brom. He's in year 6 or 7 or 12, whatever year he was in college at that point, right? And he comes to the New Orleans Saints, and, they at a certain point they turn to him, and he's getting a little better each week. And again, so that helped him. That helped him develop. And I just think with quarterbacks, there's a mad scramble, but fit's important. His poise, you're mentioning strength, poise, accuracy under pressure, arm strength, they all translate at any level, right? And then I think it really does become, what does the kid do best, and how do we highlight that in our program?
Yeah, Mike, before I let you go, you mentioned something with Hopper and with Sorsby, talking about that fit, right? And I think it's something that it's important. I'm interested in your thoughts on. At the college level, where you have these guys at a maximum for 4 years or 5 years, and at a minimum, really at this point, 3 or really even 1 because of the transfer portal, you really have to build an identity in a way that an NFL team obviously will have an identity, but it's kind of a talent first league. Can you discuss kind of the differences from a coaching or college general manager point of view when you're trying to build an identity as a college program versus an NFL team?
It's brutally difficult today. And the words I use all the time are fit and culture. And they're so important. I don't care if you're a high school team, it's those things are critical to success of a program. A high school team, you're there for 4 years, and now things are changing in college because of the portal. So I think what we're seeing is a balance. Coaches are trying to find that balance between, in basketball, it's easy. Let's go get these 3 guys. We got a national championship contender, right? Football, it's different. How do we fit all the pieces to this jigsaw together? So it's more and more important to have somebody you trust, like a Sumer, or however you're going about it, to be able to sit down and not only say, we like this kid's traits, but he's our kind of guy. Because, again, the high-level guys are going to be gone by the time January 2nd happens. They're already going to be committed. The important thing to me, kind of like in day 3 of the draft, is where are you finding those other kids, and how are you getting them, and how do they fit into your culture? And we already gave the best example. I'm blown away by what they're doing at Indiana. I mean, I think that guy's done an amazing job bringing in talent from the portal, still recruiting in high school, and basically getting everybody to buy into this is who we are. And all I got to do is look at the 4 guys that we highlighted, or 3, whatever it was, the quarterback, the linebacker, the corner, and the wideout. All I have to do is look at those 4 guys' tape, and they're glue guys. They play the game with toughness, competitiveness. They're the kind of guys that fit you. And this is another thing that's happening right now with the portal, is that coaches are starting to be expected to bring some of their guys with them, just like Signetti did. So there's all these things evolving, and 2 years from now, we'll have this conversation, you and I, and we'll be in a different planet. But the teams that can handle the changes successfully by being proactively scouting throughout the entire year. Sumer's going to generate 2,500 reports this month, portal reports. Next year, the goal is 6,000, meaning you can't wait to the last minute. You got to scout just about every kid in college football and be ready for that kid to be in the portal.
Mike Mayock, high-level insights. I got to say, I'm excited for the draft season now, talking through some of these guys and starting to catch a blind eye towards some of those seniors who are going to be in the Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl. I'm very excited, so thank you for joining us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks, Sam.